You're not truly respected for being kind. You're simply tolerated because you pose no threat. Kindness, in many cases, isn't rewarded with admiration, but with neglect. People applaud your understanding nature while secretly using you like a stepping stone, smiling politely as they do. Contrary to popular belief, Machiavelli didn't write for the corrupt or heartless. He wrote for the unsuspecting, those who mistakenly think that a kind heart alone is enough to navigate the world. But reality has teeth. The more you try to appease everyone, the more you slowly disappear from your own life. What we often label as goodness has turned into a performance of self-erasure, one that gets applause from others while draining the soul of the performer. You're not peaceful, you're programmed. You might call it compassion or empathy, but the world often views it as frailty. History is rarely shaped by the soft-hearted. It's shaped by the perceptive, those with clarity and strength. If you continue to chase the image of the ideal, selfless person, you'll likely vanish without a trace, remembered by no one. But here's a disturbing possibility. What if the very kindness that convinced you to stay silent was placed there intentionally, so you'd never rise to your full potential? Up next, we'll explore how society conditioned you through praise to become agreeable, and why it needs you to remain so. From a young age, you were rewarded for giving in. That's better. Don't make a fuss. Calm down. And so, you obeyed, because for you, love came with stipulations. Be a good child and I'll stay. Be easy and I'll approve of you. You weren't nurtured to be whole. You were sculpted to be acceptable. Over time, without ever consciously choosing it, you started to believe that being good meant diminishing yourself. That standing your ground was impolite. That saying no was selfish. That expressing anger was ugly. Kindness became a role, a carefully maintained, ever-smiling, slowly suffocating mask. But here's the flaw in that mask. The version of you that aims to please everyone never ends up pleasing yourself. And as Machiavelli observed, those who labor to appear overly virtuous become predictable, and predictability invites manipulation. The world doesn't necessarily desire your freedom. It craves your usefulness. Nice enough not to challenge the status quo, helpful enough to be depended on, compliant enough to remain small. So what if this version of you, the likable one, is just an elegant form of captivity? In the following section, we'll look deeper into what Machiavelli saw with stunning clarity: the harsh distinction between being loved and being respected. Most people want to be loved, but few realize the steep cost. When your existence revolves around being adored, you inevitably begin editing yourself, removing the rough edges, quieting your truth. You start rehearsing your words, curating your emotions, hoping to maintain favor. You become a performer in someone else's theater, trading authenticity for applause. Machiavelli didn't say it out of cruelty when he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." He said it because he understood power. The world responds to boundaries, not sentiment. Those who draw clear lines are noticed. Those who aim only to please are overlooked. The affection you're chasing might not even be love. It might just be emotional dependency, dressed up as virtue. You want to be truly seen, but you're terrified that the unfiltered version of you won't be accepted. Ironically, the pleasant version that you show isn't loved either. It's used. And the most painful part? It's used without remorse, because you never required more. Next, we'll address one of the most painful truths, the giving paradox, and why the more you give, the less you receive. Not by accident, but by design. Let's face it, the more you offer, the less people seem to notice. The more you try to be accommodating, the more they take for granted. The more you bend, the more others push. Your kindness, though pure, morphs into a permanent obligation. But this isn't just bad fortune, it's systemic. The emotional economy of the world is built around scarcity. When something is constantly available, always pleasant, always self-sacrificing, it begins to lose perceived value. You could possess the purest intentions, the gentlest soul, but without consequences, others begin to treat you like a replaceable tool. And tools don't get thanked, they get used. Machiavelli didn't idolize virtue. He understood that unguarded virtue often becomes invisible. Kindness, when not paired with boundaries, attracts those who exploit. You think you're being empathetic, but underneath it's fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of causing conflict, fear of asserting your full self with firmness, voice, and will. And what if I told you that this fear is your real prison? In the next section, we'll unearth its origins, how you were conditioned to hide yourself, and why the time has come to break that mold, to abandon the silent script of submission. No one is born afraid to set boundaries. That fear is taught. You were taught that crying was dramatizing, that disagreeing was ungrateful, that asserting discomfort was impolite, and each time you buried your pain to avoid tension, you lost touch with a piece of who you are. The script was cloaked in love. Be a good child. Don't create drama. Respect your elders. Slowly, invisibly, you began existing only within the space others gave you permission to occupy. You watched for signs of discomfort in others before you dared speak. You adjusted yourself constantly to remain digestible. But that's not empathy, that's survival. And here's the cruel twist. You began to mistake this vanishing act for virtue. But truly good people don't need to disappear to be loved. You became an expert in making yourself small. Machiavelli, if he stood before you, would hold up a mirror and ask, "Are you actually good or just trained to be useful?" Because as long as your existence revolves around being liked, you will remain bent, bowed, diminished. But what happens if you choose to rise? In the next section, we'll explore the brutal but liberating shift Machiavelli offers. Stop chasing approval and begin building authority. You don't need to shout to be noticed, but you must stop waiting for permission to take up space. Respect isn't born of your softness, it's born of your stance. Those with clear boundaries are remembered. Those always agreeable are forgotten. You've spent so long trying to be understood, trying to be accepted. But real transformation, the shift that commands how others treat you, begins when you start saying no, calmly, without guilt, without justification. Machiavelli once said that well-applied severity is more effective than perpetual kindness. Because simply put, the world doesn't respond to your intentions. It responds to how you carry yourself. If you're always sweet, always accommodating, always yielding, no one sees you as a force. And yes, a small measure of fear is essential, not for domination, but to avoid becoming disposable. Authority doesn't mean aggression, it means clarity. It means defining where you end and where others may not cross. It's the bravery to stop being nice and start being whole. Because those who show their full selves may ruffle feathers, but they also earn true respect. And from that place of form, strength, and soul, your liberation finally begins. Explore how to reclaim your presence, your soul, and your identity, not through force, but by finally stepping back into your life as someone real, not someone rehearsed. You didn't vanish overnight, it happened quietly. A slow fading, masked by smiles and agreeable nods. It began with the first time you said, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. The first time you forgave too quickly. The first time your firm no softened into a hesitant maybe. No one noticed. Because being agreeable is quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It folds itself away neatly. But somewhere deep inside, you know the truth. You've seen it in the mirror. The pleasant face paired with eyes silently screaming for something more. And the fear, it lingers. Fear of rejection, fear of being labeled difficult, fear of standing alone. But living in fear isn't living, it's theater. And you weren't born to play a part. Machiavelli would have said, "It's not about being adored, it's about refusing to be overlooked." True presence doesn't beg, it emanates. It changes the air in the room without uttering a word. You don't need to explain your every feeling. You don't need to ask for permission to be whole. Real freedom begins not when others grant you peace, but when you guard your truth as something sacred, something untouchable. Being good was never about disappearing. It's about the courage to remain visible, even when your presence disrupts comfort. When you stop performing, the world must adjust its gaze, and for the first time, it begins to truly see you. In this final section, we face the core question, the one you've avoided, silenced, dressed up in pleasantries. Do you want to be loved or do you want to be free? It's the question that separates a life of quiet frustration from one of fearless authenticity. Because as long as your sense of peace depends on being accepted, you will shrink to fit. You will mold yourself to suit others' comfort zones. You will be praised, yes, but also quietly imprisoned, polished, palatable, alone. Freedom demands risk. The risk of being disliked, misunderstood, the risk of standing alone in your wholeness, of being too complex to categorize, too real to dismiss. Machiavelli understood that those who live only for love will always be chained to the gaze of others. And Buddha, in his silence, might remind you that real peace arrives when you no longer believe the persona is your identity. Being free doesn't mean being harsh. It means being true. True to your instincts. True to your voice. True to the one in the mirror. Not for how they look, but for the courage behind their eyes. And no, there won't be applause. There won't be fireworks or public praise. What comes instead is a quieter reward. A silence that no longer feels empty, but grounding. A silence that doesn't stifle, but sets you free. In that space, for perhaps the first time, you'll feel at home within your own being. Not to impress, not to win affection, but because you no longer have anything to prove. Not good in the performative sense, good in the grounded sense, honest, whole, unapologetically real. And that, more than any praise, more than any smile of approval, is where your true power begins. If this message resonated with your spirit, consider sharing it. Someone out there might be carrying the same questions, the same doubts, the same quiet hope, and your sharing might be the reminder they need. Stay true, stay kind, stay you. For more insights on philosophy, personal growth, and the art of clear thinking, subscribe and turn on notifications. Flow through life and embrace the journey of thought with curiosity and insight. Seek truth, seek wisdom, and remember to question everything. Until next time, stay curious.